Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and you know that I love bringing to you guests who have focused on their own growth as a leader and also who are committed to the development of others so that they can achieve their full potential. And I couldn't be more excited about my guest today because he has focused on both of these his entire career. And so I'm just delighted to welcome as my guest a special CEO. Thank you for joining me today, Tim Lupinacci.
Great, Meredith. I'm so excited to be here. And as I've mentioned to you, you've added value to me already. So I'm looking forward to having a great discussion.
Well, I am too, Tim. And I am eager to tell my audience about you and then jump into our conversation. Tim is CEO and chair at Baker Donelson, where he leads over 1,300 individuals in 22 offices across the Southeastern United States. Tim is presently leading the firm's 5-year BakerVision for 2028 strategy and its diversity and inclusion compact. And we're going to talk about both of those in more detail. Tim is a lifelong leadership student. And he recently launched a nonprofit called Everybody Leads. It's focused on empowering individuals in underserved communities with basic leadership skills and confidence to better lead themselves, lead others, and lead in the community. So, Tim, there's so much for us to discuss around leadership today. And I want to start with your own journey as a leader, because I know you had an early experience that shaped you. And then also, after you talk about that, describe what led to your becoming the CEO and chair at Baker Donelson.
Oh, that's great. Well, great questions, Meredith. So it's a lot of in between. But so I literally kind of wandered into law school, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. And I had taken a class that got me intrigued with law. So I came out and started practicing at a large firm. And I was about a second-year attorney, still learning the ropes. It was all very transactional to me in the sense I would get a project, I would do the project, I would turn it in, I'd go to the next project. And I got put on a very large project for one of our senior lawyers I was working with, a mentor. And he was a very difficult boss, but I learned a lot from him. And he had put me and then a more senior lawyer on the matter. And we worked and got the project done, turned it in, and I went about to the next project. And the next day, we got called into his office, which you never want to get called into Bob's office, and myself and the senior lawyer. And he was yelling to about a dozen lawyers on the phone who were in a conference call about how these idiots had messed this up. And of course, that's not a good leadership principle about how to lead. But he was yelling about how we had missed something in the work we had done and that we were going to stay all night to get it fixed. And so I'm here thinking I'm going to lose my job. I don't even know what I can do other than this. And so we did stay there late into the night and got it done. And I had drawn the short straw to have to drive our boss to a court hearing the next day, and I had to pick him up at his house. And I thought, this is not going to go well. And there was a lot of silence for the first part of the trip. And then he did, to his credit, apologized. He said, I shouldn't have yelled at you in front of other people. I should have dealt with that separately. So I thought I appreciated that. And he said, the thing that got me so angry with you, particularly, Tim, is that I see you are you have a significant future ahead of you, and you are a leader. And I expect you to be able to step up and own a project, even if there's someone more senior on the project with you who may or may not be as strong a leader. And that was really the first time I recall someone talking to me about in the context of you are a leader, and they saw confidence in me to do that. And it really then made me go on the lifelong journey, as you mentioned, about, well, if I'm a leader, what does that mean and how can I get better at it? How can I really make sure that I'm owning the matter? How can I get invested in the client that we're representing? How can I help others get better. And so it really led to learning, reading, listening to books on tape back in that era when you did books on tape, going to some leadership conferences. And I just always thought a lot of the people I was reading and learning from all talked about how you can get better every day. And so that was something I really focused on. I made mistakes. I tried to learn from them and then get better, which really led to a lot of series of ultimately leadership opportunities, starting when I was still a young lawyer, but now I had young lawyers on my team that I needed to think through how do I help them get better. And I did some things there. And then ultimately became an office leader in Baker Donelson. I became a leader of the practice group of in financial services lawyers. Then I built a whole department, a business unit around the financial services industry. And then 5 years ago, my predecessor as CEO determined that he was going to step down. He'd been in the role 20 years. So I really thought hard about if this was the next step of what I was interested in doing, because I love practicing law full time. I love my clients. But I really, as I thought about it, I thought, I think I would really like to see if I can do this and see if I could get selected. So it did. And I've been in the role 4 years now this month. And it's gone very struggling times, as we all know, but we've had a lot of rewarding success and really do it because I love our people. And really just that continuing fusing of everybody is a leader and everybody can get better. And we need all of us working together, regardless of title, position, or degree you have, to try to accomplish things to serve our clients. So I know it's a lot in there, but that's a shortened version of everything.
Well, and I loved your story and your journey. And there are 3 words that popped out. Maybe it's 4. Yes. I love my people.
Yeah.
That to me is just so vital, and it's not talked about enough. It isn't emphasized enough. We have this kind of barrier to talking about love in the workplace because it gets these connotations that aren't as positive. And yet it's amazing what can happen when people really feel that you deeply care about them. And so I would love for you just to talk a little bit about, what have you learned about the importance of doing that? And how does that weave itself into the vision, the strategy that you put in place, and getting buy-in from everyone for that?
Yeah, great question. And you're right, it's not talked about enough. And it is interesting because obviously as a leader of an organization, you have financial metrics you have to achieve, and you have to keep the lights on, and you have to give exceptional client service to your clients, because that's why we're here. But really, that's all important, and it's something I've got to drive every day. But what gets me fired up every day is really that interaction with our people, those relationships, and watching folks believe in themselves, that they can accomplish, greater things and grow in their skills. And so that's just a part. I mean, I know some people are more people persons or whatever, and some aren't. I tend to very much be a relational and relationship type individual that gets me filled up with energy. And so going back to the journey of being CEO, we're very fortunate that I had a 6-month transition period and I'd been at the firm, and I had been at the management, the board table. So I knew a lot about it, but I didn't know everyone around the firm. So I literally went on, at that point, we had 20 offices. I did a tour of every office to sit down with every individual in the office in groups, and just to listen. How can we get better as a firm? What are some of the biggest challenges you have? What are ways we can get better? And that it helped build some relationship. It started to build some trust that I was listening. And then a critical part of that was then I needed to come back and actually make some changes based on some of those comments. Now, not every comment was something we should do or needed to do. Some of it was just they wanted to get something off their chest or whatever. But I did. I mean, I was listening with intent to get better, because I don't know it all. I'm going to learn from everybody and learn the best thing to do. So, and then when they started seeing me execute some things that they did, I think that just built that trust level with someone who was new to the role, and many people didn't know before. So that was some of the ways of building that relationship. Again, I mentioned my first town hall when they were announcing I was the CEO. I talked about this idea that I viewed everyone on the call as a leader, and we really needed to all be working together to serve our clients, regardless of title. and that we were going to invest in every individual's pathway to try to help find their purpose and to help grow in their skills, because that's just going to make us a better organization and increase engagement. So it's a lot of different things probably around that topic, but I do think it's invaluable for leaders to spend that time, invest that time in their people, in their colleagues.
Well, before we go into the vision and the strategy, I want to back up a minute. Talk about what is a town hall there? What does that consist of? And why is that important? Because I think some folks are reluctant to have that because they're concerned about what they might hear. So how do you structure that so it's a real positive experience?
Well, and again, I do want to give you kudos with the book on communication, because it all really boils down to communication, right? And we're a very transparent organization. So pre-pandemic, that town hall, when I would come to an office, it literally would be in a conference room. We'd probably bring in lunch or breakfast. I'm very much like having what I call a dinner table diplomacy, just getting to know people around a table. I think Winston Churchill called it that. So when I would visit an office, and I still do this today, we'll get in an office, I'll do a PowerPoint of presentation of what's going on in the firm and celebrate some wins and local wins, and usually we'll have a meal. But pre-pandemic, what that would look like as a firm-wide basis with the multiple offices, we would meet in conference rooms in each office, but then it would be video conference. So I happened to be in Birmingham as my home, so I would get in the conference room in Birmingham and have my colleagues with me, but then it would be on video. To shifted in the pandemic where it was all done for a long time just on WebEx or Teams or Zoom calls, where every individual would just be on a Zoom call. But we moved from, we had historically done about quarterly town halls like that, just to bring everyone updated. We pivoted, like the word of the pandemic timeframe, to every month town halls like that, where it would be me leading with a PowerPoint, everyone could Zoom in. But we also did, when I became CEO, and it kind of goes back to even just building that relationship and the communication piece, I started doing, our firm's Baker Donelson, and we love putting everything with Baker something. So we have Baker Cares, we have BakerVision. And so I talked about Baker Next, because I was a new CEO, first time in 20 years. And I did Baker Next weekly videos, just 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, what's going on, or celebrating a win. And that was going on for about a year before the pandemic. Well, then the pandemic, we ended up doing it every day, which we did like 400 daily videos. And it wasn't always me. Ultimately, we got a lot of other leaders to help, but that was just a way to connect everyone through the medium of, the virtual medium. So I know your question was about town halls. That's a corollary of the town halls. And now to this day, we're back. We do it through Zoom. We do have folks that meet in conference rooms. We're kind of a hybrid situation at the organization. So folks can get in a conference room and watch it, or they do it on their individual screen, and do it usually every other month now.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, we go through the financials, how the firm's doing. I mean, different levels of data depending on the group I'm talking to, but we try to be very transparent about what is going well, what's not going well, how we can all get better, things like that.
I love that, because I think that level of openness creates an atmosphere of safety. Because if people see that you're willing to be honest and show the warts, the bruises, along with the successes, then it seems to me that that is modeling for them what it's okay for them to do as well.
And it's not easy as a leader, right? Because everyone thinks you're like, oh, I'm infallible. But I've said it. I mean, I make mistakes a lot, and then I learn from them. But there's times I need to apologize, and I've done that in this role. And again, it's not easy, but I think you're right that it just builds because nobody's perfect, right? I mean, so everyone's going to make mistakes. So it's to be comfortable talking about it, I think, is important.
It is, because the truth is they already know you're not perfect. So if you're willing to admit it, so many leaders, it seems to me, that are in more of that authoritative mindset are reluctant to admit when they've made a mistake or they're wrong, because of a fear of looking bad and losing respect. If only they realize, like you have, that you actually gain respect of people, you build that trust and loyalty when they see that you're willing to own it when
Right.
when you're wrong. And so I just think I want to congratulate you on doing
Oh,
that, because I think that a lot of leaders are reluctant to. So that's a wonderful model for your people. So let's go back now to your big vision, your
yep.
5-year vision. You know, that's not easy to get people on board with that. So talk about, I guess, a couple of different things. One is at the executive level. Was this something that was co-created with other people, you know, the C-level executives? And how did you get their buy-in? And then how have you rolled out to get buy-in from all levels of the firm?
Yeah, great question. And so we started strategic planning in early 2020, which of course we all know then that got put on hold. But it was an interesting dynamic because I had a group of leaders from around the firm, some of a younger generation and others who were in leadership. But it was really a disparate group just to try to get feedback about who we wanted Baker Donelson to be moving forward.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think a lot of organizations are probably like this. We have a dynamic that we have some individuals who have national practices and some international, but national. We have some who have very local practices and some that are more regional. And we all, and that's part of, to me, the great fabric of our firm is that it's a disparate group and we work together to make sure that that works well. But when we get into strategic planning, the people who had national practices wanted us to just be focused on national, and the ones who are local said, no, we need to not get rid of our roots in the local community. And of course, it was not exclusive either, but it just like, how do we make this fit? And then the pandemic hit, and we had a few meetings virtually, but still were just, it seemed like a spiral, like we couldn't get to some consensus. So once the pandemic started lifting a little bit, I literally said, I'm going to take all my notes from all these discussions, a lot of feedback, things I had read, and go away for 2 or 3 days. And our COO, Jennifer, had a mountain cabin up in North Carolina. So I went up there for 3 days just by myself with all my notes spread out, and I had note cards, and I literally had like these big whiteboards, 2 of them, that I would get notes, I'd sketch it all out. And when I was looking at it, really just, and I wanted to be something that was inclusive. So really thinking about it and thinking about something that had really worked with me for my own career was this. It's a very simple idea that's not new, but if being trusted advisors to each client. And that entails knowing the client, building that relationship, building that trust, helping them with their strategy. And what I liked about it was I thought that was a very inclusive strategy because not only are lawyers who are representing external clients, they have to build those trusted relationships, but we have internal clients. We help and work with each other, and we can build and increase in our skill building and trusted advisor relationships within the firm. So it's something that all 1,300 people could, embrace. I laugh a little bit because I literally came down from the mountain cabin into, we had scheduled an executive team meeting in the area, and I came down like 2 whiteboards, and I joked about I came with the mountain, came down the mountain with my 2 tablets of BakerVision. But it was a lot of the basics of stuff that I'd heard and learned from other folks, and then I walked through it with our executive team, and they were like that. They were just sold on the fact that yes, that makes sense. It embraces who we have been, because a lot of it's built on our firm's been over 100 years old, and the legacy of Senator Howard Baker and some of what he was very much a conciliatory and a leader and compassion. And so they were fired up. So then I took it the next month to the board, and they said, yes, we believe in that. And then, of course, as you said, the hard work is the broader buy-in, and there are hundreds and hundreds of strategic plans where you do this great strategic plan and you put it on the shelf, and 4 years later, we need a new plan, and you pull it off the shelf. So we built out an execution plan. We called it our charter. And that included more folks investing in these are the concepts. What do you think about this? And a lot of it did mold a little bit about, like, I wanted some very specific measures to hold me accountable. And some of those changed as people said, well, that's ambitious. Maybe that's too ambitious. What do you think about this? And we, again, used town halls. We built buy-in with our business service leaders. And then we came with an all-attorney retreat, which is about 650 of us last year in New Orleans, to launch it with the concepts, but also then with practical tools. The whole retreat was built around these are the principles, but what's it mean for your individual practice? And we did have some consultants help build out the charter and think about that. And so now we literally have a plan with even quarterly milestones to try to execute. Now we've made it through the first year. We hit all the milestones. It was very successful, but we know, everyone knows, like year two of a strategic plan is the most dangerous and difficult because people see it's working, they can get complacent. So we're really working to just continue to take it to the next level. So I know it's a lot of information, but that's how we did it.
But I love everything that you shared because it shows the various steps that were necessary to take. And I think sometimes we can gloss over those and hope that people will get it and somehow it's going to be absorbed by others. But you were very intentional, and conscious about the various levels of buy-in. And I think that your retreat, where you really took the concepts to make them real, was so powerful. I'll be eager to hear how year two, and of course 3, 4, 5 go, but year two, especially like you said, because of what can happen after a year one, especially with your success. So congratulations on that.
Oh, no, it's very rewarding on that. And one thing I should say, because I do, as I mentioned, just about how it's inclusive for everyone, following the retreat, which was attorney only, we, my COO, myself, and our board all fanned out. So over about a 1-month period, we were in every office giving BakerVision presentations to reinforce the principles for the folks who had been at the retreat, but also now to introduce it to our business services professional, our staff. And then we launched what I call the Trusted Advisor Mini MBA, which is not a real MBA, and I know people who actually have them. But it was training, skill building. We did that into the fall, so at every level in the firm, so we can all get better every day, no matter how senior or how experienced you are or how trusted you are. So we had actionable steps that helped continue the drumbeat, and of course communication as well, as you know. So yeah.
That's great. Well, something else that you've done, and I mentioned it in your introduction, it had this title, Diversity and Inclusion Compact. And there are a lot of companies that are getting on board with the whole, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I think you really have been sensitive to and aware of and committed to actually making sure these various elements, from women to marginalized groups, to minorities, have had seats at the table. And I would love for you to share that, because I think there are organizations that are still trying to figure out, how do we make this work? What does it look like so it's not seen as a program, but is seen as part of the culture and the way we are with each other?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a continuing evolution of progress and process and learning. So no matter where you are on the journey, and we have had maybe a little bit further along, but we're learning and getting better every day. But I think it's interesting because some of the seeds of my interest in DE&I personally I lived in Guadalajara, Mexico when I was growing up, and I think just being introduced to living in another culture, just something was just natural to me. So I didn't think of it as anything. It's just kind of infused into who I was. And then I did early on as a young lawyer, I was able to participate in some organizations that were talking a lot about the importance and the benefit of having more diverse and inclusive thoughts around helping to serve clients. I mean, just you get better results. And so it's just always been a part of me and thinking I can get better and our team can get better, the smaller teams I was leading, if we have more folks at the table with different views, because then we can think through different things. So it's just always been a part of me. And Baker Donelson, I joined the firm 18 years ago, although I've been practicing 32 years. But for over 20 years, the firm itself had a diversity committee that was working and thinking about these issues. So I do think I step into a legacy of a firm that was recognizing these important issues. But frankly, even our leaders of the group would say it had kind of plateaued. We would have some steps forward and some steps back, and the legal industry is does not have widespread representation of minority lawyers or even women, and the industries are getting better for sure. But we've made progress, and we had a diversity committee, and we have a women's initiative. Our diversity committee more focused on racial, ethnic, LGBTQ type issues and progress. So when I became CEO, we had a retreat that kind of introduced me as the CEO, and we're talking about Baker Next, as I mentioned earlier. And we had a client panel on the business case for diversity. We just want to have some client voice at the retreat. And one of our clients said that you can create the best plans, you can read books and come up with the best things you think you need to lead. And she counseled us that said the first thing you need to do is do an internal audit and find out what your people think and how you're doing on these issues. And I hadn't really, frankly, thought about that. And this was in 2019. And so we spent that summer of 2019 doing an internal audit. And it really brought to our attention, some things that we could do better, including advancement. So in our world of advancing to become a shareholder, an owner in the firm, and then an equity shareholder having ownership of the firm, it could be leadership positions. The people didn't see as much of a pathway for our diverse minority lawyers. It also talked about they didn't feel like there was sufficient mentoring going on, and really that elevated mentoring I like to call sponsorship, like really investing in the person, understanding them, and helping them, give them introduction to clients, to the community. And I had really grown a lot in my understanding of that with in sponsoring women that have been on my team over the years. So that was very natural, but I heard it back. So we said, okay, we have to work on that. And then retention. We were doing an okay job with folks joining us, but then for various reasons, some of them we needed to get better at, but people would leave. So we really built this idea. I called it the Diversity and Inclusion Compact. And I like the idea of a compact because it's a two-way agreement. Like, we've got to get better. You want to help us get better. We both are to commit to each other. We're going to work through this together, of everyone in the firm. And it really was a goal to become an industry leader in DE&I by 2025. And I know I've got various dates, but that was done first in time before the vision. And it certainly supports our vision still to this day. And when I say industry leader, I meant the percentages of lawyers in our firm who were, minority lawyers and shareholder and leadership. And so we launched that in early 2020, and we're now 3 years into that. And I'm proud that we've made progress, and we put our metrics out to the world. This is where we stand. We need to get better in all of this because we were below industry averages, and we were going to hold ourselves accountable. And I'm proud that in 3 years, we have gotten better in every one of our categories. And in a couple of them, we're now ahead of the industry average. But the good news is the industry is improving. So we've got further to go the next couple of years. But we built in even our leadership compensation process, how we reward our leaders who are spending their time leading groups. We included how they're making progress on their compact commitments as part of that. So we're trying to put our money where our mouth is about trying to make this work. And we have made progress, but we have a long way to go. And then there's a whole separate category talking about women, our women's initiative, which is also really amazing. And the leadership there has done a great job I could talk about.
So give me an example on the women's initiative. What kinds of things are in place, or are you doing?
Yeah, so as a firm, a couple things. One, I had the benefit about 10 years ago to be the co-chair of what we called the Women to Leadership Committee, to really figure out how can we get better as a firm of women having opportunities to move into leadership. And again, we put some metrics out there about trying to exceed the industry average on the women who were on our board, on our compensation committee, on our department chairs. And then to be very intentional about training and building and making sure that women were given those opportunities. And again, I led that for a while. Others are leading it now, and I'm proud that we do exceed all the industry average. I think 50% of our practice group leaders are women, 50% of our office leaders are women, 50% of our 4 business unit heads are women. Of course, our COO is a woman. So first of it was identifying where we were and saying, how are some steps to get there? Another great example, which our leader of our women's initiative really came up with, she realized that a lot of our women were advancing to what we call income shareholder, but not to the equity shareholder level where they have the ownership in the firm. And a lot of that is around business development and how much business you control. But there's a lot that move in that pathway. So she created a women to equity program. It was something that was deficient in what we were doing. And so let's build something to try to help. and it includes specific sponsors in leadership assigned to the individual women. It's business development coaching. They each have a partner that they have to hold each other accountable on executing their plans. And it's been, I think we had 5 women of that cohort advance to equity this year. And over the last 3 years, many women have moved that have been part of that. So that's kind of how we've approached it. Where can we get better? And then let's implement a change. During the pandemic, the Women's Initiative really helped us think through how can we can best support our family, with families having to have children at home and had to, do schooling for their children while they're trying to practice. And so we came up with some really, I think, innovative ways to provide, working attorney credit, which is what's really important in a law firm for childcare. Like, we know you're investing time. We want to give you credit for all you're doing. And so things like that we look at. So just a couple examples.
I like the way you really are looking at the whole person,
right?
And not just their particular job. So I just want to congratulate you on everything you just said about what you are doing. The fact that you still have a ways to go, but looking at what you have accomplished, I think is great. I also want to take a few minutes to give you a chance to talk about this wonderful nonprofit that you've put together, Everybody Leads. So talk about where that came from and what its purpose is and what's happening with that so far.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Meredith. It's really interesting because it literally was about a year ago. A good friend of mine asked me the question, so what's Tim plus 5 years or Tim plus 10 years? And I said, well, I mean, I've launched this vision. I want to keep leading, getting through the vision. But I knew at some point, like I said, I love practicing law. I love what I'm doing. I don't have any immediate thoughts to like step down or anything. But I thought, at some point, I would like to maybe have more time invested in like nonprofit leadership. And I've done nonprofit work over the years. So I said, so that was my answer. Like, oh, maybe I'll do some lead a nonprofit, once I'm moving towards retirement or whatever. And then they said, well, you shouldn't wait till retirement to then figure out what's next. You should figure it out now and start planting some seeds towards it. And I thought, well, okay, that's great. And so then I started sitting there thinking, okay, well, I love leadership. And I've been very fortunate, as many of your listeners will, to have had access and opportunities to get better as a leader in a variety of different settings. But I know not every individual has that luxury. We, as a firm, we have a 3-year partnership with homeless organizations throughout our footprint to try to help eradicate homelessness in some small way, and helping come alongside them. And as I was meeting with a lot of those leaders, as we were, built these relationships, I realized they're doing so many great basic skill building type training, like how to get a bank account, how to get a driver's license, how to get skills to go get a job, right? I mean, to help with that problem of homelessness. But then there's like this other layer. Now you have a job. Are you being trained in like conflict resolution? And how do you work together in a team where maybe you haven't worked together in a team and maybe you had no understanding of what that even looks like? You maybe didn't have an example. So it really ended up in this idea of, is there a need to have basic leadership skill coming alongside other nonprofits who are doing great work, but is there a need to have basic leadership skills to help empower the folks you serve to get better in leadership? And when I talked to a lot of nonprofit leaders, they were like, that's amazing. We could absolutely do it. So it led to building out a training manual, which we have. And we're starting to partner with some organizations to come in and, again, teach basic leadership skills where it's not just Tim talking for 60 minutes. It's Tim talking for a very little bit of time, but allowing folks in small groups to then talk through the concepts and what does that look like, and give feedback, and then just help invest in them. Ideally, I'd love to have the nonprofit have a project that they need actually led, and then we can actually put the work into process. And so one that we're about to launch is with, just as an example, an organization that their mission is to help individuals coming out of prison to then get acclimated back into society, into the world, into a job. So they were like, our folks would benefit from this because they're doing like dozens of hours of all this training and all these things that they need to know, but they're not really hitting some of these leadership things. So that's the concept, and excited about it building out, and we'll see where it goes.
It's wonderful. Well, Tim, I just want to let you know I have such admiration for you.
Oh.
As a human being, as a leader, and as the CEO, Baker Donelson, it just seems like they're so fortunate to have you in that role right now because of the impact that you've had and are having with each person there. I just have such respect for your seeing how important it is to touch people at an individual level and to ask for feedback and receive it graciously and act upon it when it makes sense to do so. And so that to me just creates this wonderful culture that you have where you're giving people an opportunity to advance or at least grow and fulfill their potential. So thank you so much for doing all that you are doing. And I would love for people to be able to find you and connect with you. So let them know what's the best way to connect with you and learn more about Baker Donelson and Everybody Leads.
Meredith, thank you so much for those kind words. What an encouragement. So you can find me at BakerDonelson.com, BakerDonelson.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. And then everybodyleads.org, which is everybody, and then leads.org, is literally, it's like building the plane while you're flying it. It's ready to launch, and it'll hopefully be launched soon. We'll have some training videos and some of the content from our training manuals, and just to give you a little bit more insight about what we're trying to do. So those would be the best places to find me.
That's great. Well, Tim, thank you again for being with me today. It was so great. And I know my listeners will benefit and have so much to think about in terms of applying some of the things that you are doing and have done at Baker Donelson.
Well, thank you, Meredith. Thank you for this opportunity. It's really been great.
Thanks for tuning into my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out our 2 books, Connect with Your Team and Peer Coaching Made Simple. While you're there, download the free facilitator guide to find out how to implement our unique peer coaching system. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.